what is interesting is that we continue to fall into this pattern, I guess, that we always want the answers. Just, can you just give it to me like in 1, 2, 3, like, and really the mysterious answer to all of this is relationship building. And so I say to people, like, if you really care about children and really care about their lives, then you have relationships with them. Curiosity is one of the most beautiful things. And curiosity is something that we should always hold with kids, because if we were always curious, we will shut the fuck up and we'll listen to them. It is curiosity and inquiry, allowing kids to ask questions and stuff like that. If you even do that, that is a good beginning. You don't have to be perfect. And that's the whole thing. We don't have the playbook. You don't have to be perfect. Every child is different. Every family is different. Some people would be like, no, I don't want to talk about that. But the reality is that talking about human connection, how we connect to one another, how we love one another, how we're good to one another, also is about loving ourselves. So if we teach our children to love themselves and what that means, they can have healthy relationships.
You know, we can do this. We can do this as communities. We can do this as families. We can do this as carers. We can do this as citizens.
We must.
We must, right? I'm Cindy Darnell. Welcome to The Erotic Philosopher, the podcast where we examine and explore sex and relationships through social, personal, cultural, scientific, political, and other lenses, and unpack and explore your erotic quandaries with the world's wisest erotic philosopher. Welcome back to Season 4 of The Erotic Philosopher, the podcast where we explore life, sex, and modern relationships with some of the world's wisest erotic philosophers. My name is Cindy Darnell. I'm a sexologist, a sex and relationships therapist and coach, and of course, the host of The Erotic Philosopher. I'm also the author of Sex When You Don't Feel Like It, The Truth About Mismatched Libido and Rediscovering Desire. You can find out more about me at my website, cindydarnell.com. Before we jump into today's interview, I want to tell you about a new project I'm working on. My online subscription community, where you can learn more about the issues we tackle here on The Erotic Philosopher, be they relational, personal, emotional, sexual, and beyond. So many of us need help and support in making sense of our complicated lives and relationships these days. So this new online community serves as a portal to learn more from me and from others as we dive into the issues most important to us in creating meaningful lives and fulfilling sex. You'll see more about this on my website, cindydarnell.com, under the Community tab. I'm always thrilled to introduce my guests to you, and today's holds a special place for me as their vision for ending childhood sexual abuse and creating affirming cultural change around the way we talk about sex with kids revolutionizes the way we imagine education. A content note with this episode: we do discuss sexual assault and healing from sexual trauma in a direct manner, so please use your intuition to lean into whether this episode is right for you at this time. Ignacio G. Hutía Xeiti Rivera is a cultural sociologist with expertise in sexual trauma, healing, and liberation for marginalized people. They are an internationally known gender non-conforming speaker, trainer, and consultant. Ignacio is the founder and co-executive director at the HEAL Project, where they work to prevent and end childhood sexual abuse. Ignacio is the host of Connecting the Dots, an interview show on how childhood sexual assault shows up in every day in the media, as well as Caution Unrestricted, a talk show that breaks open sexual stigma and taboo. Welcome to The Erotic Philosopher, Ignacio. It's wonderful to be here with you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I had the pleasure of seeing you speak in the before times at the Woodhull conference, which feels like a lifetime ago. And I was so impressed with not only, you know, the projects that you're working on, which is why I invited you onto the podcast, but also the way you speak about this. And I think it's so rare and unique that you bring this kind of earthy gravitas and realness to this work that really resonates, I think, with my style. And certainly the people who listen to me know that I tend to, not pull punches with politeness when I'm talking about the shit that I think really matters. So before we kind of get into any of that today, what would you like folks to know about you?
I would say I have a potty mouth.
So maybe as a forewarning for folks listening, maybe put your headphones on if you're out in public, or with more sensitive listeners today.
And what else? And something that a lot of people don't know is that I identify as a mother. I am a mother, and that's a kind of a label or a title that it's never shifted for me, even as my gender has shifted. So I'm a proud mother of an adult daughter and a grandparent to a 4-year-old beautiful little boy.
Wow. Thank you so much. I'm going to say you're one of the coolest grandparents I have ever seen in my life. So awesome. You're doing a very good job. I'm thoroughly convinced. So let's start at the start with how you got into the work that you're doing, the Heal to End project and all of its associated things. It's powerful work, it's important work, and the take you have for it is very, very unique, I think, in the healing space. So take us back in time to how this started for you and what inspired you to create a project that's so sorely needed like this.
Thank you for asking me that. The Heal Project, actually, the idea of it was born probably 20 years ago. And it was when I have a history and community organizing and activism and doing a lot of different stuff. And while I was doing community organizing and activism, I was also doing my art. Poetry slams, writing stories and such. And at that time, I decided that I was going to write and perform my first, at the time, one-woman show. Because at that time in my life, I was, my suicidal ideation was off the charts. And I was trying to mother my child, who was young at the time, and trying to figure things out. So I was like, I'm going to take this rage that I have, and I'm going to put it in writing something, and I'm just going to do it. I had never done that before. I've only ever done poetry slams. And so it was a beautiful and scary process, I have to say, because the very first time I did it, I was doing it as like a reading, and I had my paper with me. I messed up so many times and stuff, but the thing I did was I wanted to have an engagement with the audience. And so through that process, as the show developed, I had interactions with the audience. They wrote me notes and notebooks that I had given to the audience members. So through the years, I was getting how I should add my mother to the show, or asking me questions about my life. So the show started out as a 20-minute little one-person thing, and it ended up being an hour long with integrating my mother into the show and all of these things, because I was having a relationship with the audience. And so this show was called Lágrimas de Cocodrilo, Crocodile Tears. And it was something that my mother used to say to me when I was young, because I cried. I was an emotional child. And so they were like, oh, it's crocodile tears, because it was always so often. And so the show is literally about my survivorship story, and that story was unique at the time because my harm doer is a female, my sister. And so at that time, I mean, there was hardly any kind of writings or research or anything on female harm doers. So people were like, they can't even compute that in their minds. And so I was telling that story. And through that, so many people started sharing their stories, disclosing to me. I was the first person they had ever told. And so the Heal Project, in essence, was my show. And then all of the kind of back and forth and resources I was giving to the audience members, and then holding space for survivors to kind of share their stories. And I wanted to make it as a project where people were sharing their stories and we were sharing it out. But again, 20 years ago, people were like, sorry, I can't talk about this publicly. I just want to tell you and thank you for doing this because now I'm not alone, you know? Uh, and so that work, even though I was doing work in LGBT, doing stuff on economic justice, I was doing stuff in environmental justice and women's rights and nonviolence, all of those things. I always carried this linear idea and work, I guess, this healing that I was doing. And as I'm in this work and I'm healing, I'm noticing a lot of things, you know, like a lot of similarities. I'm noticing a lot of things that just I kept asking myself, why does child sexual abuse happen? Why don't people want to talk about it? Why, you know, just and my work kind of came out through my performances and poetry and workshops and stuff, but not until 7 years ago, almost 8 years ago now, the Just Beginnings Collaborative, which was a collaboration of different funders, got together and decided that funding people who were working to end child sexual abuse needed to happen. And so I applied, I got it, and for 4 years I was funded to do the work. And then that's how I actually got the money, because I've had this work like in my back pocket forever, but there's no money. And then talk about money for someone who wants to fight for the sexual liberation of children. What? It's like, what are you talking about? We don't talk about sex. Children talking about sex, you know? And so it's like, yeah, we don't give you money. And we actually do not get any kind of traditional grant money. We get turned down left and right because it is a concept that they cannot grasp. They want cookie cutter, simple, give me the formula, tell me how you're going to measure it. And that's just not how it works.
No, it's not how it works. And so, you know, this is where I think your you know, project is so incredibly unique. So, and then hearing that it has its roots in storytelling, which is crucial, I think, to any kind of, you know, healing work, that there has to be an element of, you know, I would call it meaning making that goes with it, whether we're telling a story through art, whether we're telling a story through speech, whether we're telling a story through movement, sensation, whatever it is, the meaning making, how it makes us, you know, put the pieces together and then how we, you know, how we rise above our histories to move into the present and then create opportunities for others to perhaps be inspired by our healing and our change. So now, as you're working in this space, what I think, to my mind anyway, makes your work particularly unique, other than that it's presented by you, obviously it's unique for that, but that you don't shy away from encouraging carers and parents and the adults in young people's lives to talk frankly about sex. Talk us through how that came to be, how you arrived at that level of awareness, and what are people's responses to that?
Many different responses, but I think that really became clear to me when I was about to be a mother. Like, it was clear. Like, the moment I knew I was pregnant, I had an idea of how I was going to raise my child. Because even though my mother provided many good things, you know, like my mother was not a horrible person. She was a good mother, an average mom and everything. But she really omitted a lot of information from my life. And we lived, as many people live, in this kind of capitalist structure. It's like, I got to work, you go to school, let's follow the rules, let's make this easy because life is hard. And that is an understandable thing because that happens, right? And so with my daughter, when I had her, I was like, I want to do this differently. And I always knew that the thing that my mother didn't want to talk to me about was bodies, sex, relationships, intimacy, anything that had to do with anything about that. It was like, you can talk about that when you're an adult. You know, we don't talk about that with children. And so I had huge curiosity about that. And I kept wondering because of the things that were happening to me. And I was like, what is this thing, and then what is sex? Because people talk about sex around you, you don't know it. So I was literally very, very, very confused when I was a child. I didn't know my place. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how to behave. And I didn't want my child to be that way. And then, especially as I had a child who was, identified female at birth, and she still identifies as a female, I was like, she has to learn about her body, especially as a female, as a Black female, like all this, as a fat female, like all of these things that come up. I was like, she needs to understand her position in this world. And that is about learning about her body and even the possession of Black bodies way back when. Like, that is a huge part of sexual violence. We think we're talking about slavery and stuff, and that's exactly what happened during slavery. It's just mass rape, and so we need to be talking about those realities. But even before we talk about rape, because one of the things I often say, and my co-executive director, Rivera-Azad, says, is that, most people, just like myself and like Rivera, the very first thing we learned about, the very first thing we were sure about was about violence happening upon our bodies. That was, we learned that first before we learned about sex and boundaries and all of that. And so I wanted to teach her better. And so I was just being like, I'm going to tell her honestly, and we talked all the time. And my position was that I'm your mother. I'm here to provide this care for you. But at any point, you can deny this care. You can question this care. You can, and then these are all the people that you can talk to. If I'm not, if you think I'm not being nice to you or something, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people, and you can use your own people. And I talk to people specifically to let them know that I am giving you permission because I trust you and you're a part of my circle, that if my child comes to talk to you about anything of, emergency or whatever, that you have the right to help my child and not discuss that with me. So I was trying to create this agency and a boundary between her and I, that she can have the right to do anything she needs to do. And everybody thought I was crazy in my family because, of course, I was raised differently. We were raised with the, get to the corner, I'm going to whack your ass and stuff. And we've kind of somewhat evolved from that idea. So I decided to raise my daughter without hitting her. I decided to raise my daughter just talking with her and negotiating with her. And I decided to raise my daughter with her understanding of what power is in our household and in the world. That's what I changed. And so I know for a fact when it comes to body, sex, intimacy, all of that stuff, I did a damn good job when it comes to talking to my child about it. And she always came to me. She came to me to ask me questions that children probably would never ask their parents, and when she turned 15, 16, I think the gift that I gave her was a vibrator. And I was like, here you go, honey, this is great for stress. It helps you to sleep, and you can discover your body. So there you go.
There you go.
Like,
and this is such a different sort of an approach to a lot of what is often prescribed, certainly in sort of trauma narratives and healing modalities, particularly from more traditional sort of therapeutic angles, which is this thing of, we don't talk about sex directly. We talk around it, and we focus on the pain. We focus on, moving ourselves through the various states of pain management, which, has its place. I'm not saying that that's not valuable. But this approach that you take in providing education for young people straight out of the gate by being able to talk about sex, and then you as a parent talking to your own child directly about it, and then also setting them up to say, and if I am at any stage out of line or weird or making you feel uncomfortable, go and talk to any of these people, and they will not tell me what you've said, but they will be there to support you, is strangely radical in a social context, in a Western context, especially, where parents feel like they need to know every single thing about a child's inner world in order to be effective parents, and that helicopter style invasion of their privacy down to almost perhaps their erotic privacy, or people don't even want to think about their child as an erotic being or as a sexual being, you know. So when you sort of offer this framework to adults as a way of saying this is how we subvert the paradigm around childhood sexual abuse, this is how we do it. We don't sweep it under the rug. We don't relegate it to the shadows. We don't whisper behind our hands. We talk about sex. We talk about pleasure. We talk about well-being, and we talk about empowerment. How do parents respond to that?
It's a mixed bag, you know, like I think that there are a lot of parents, including parents that are like LGBTQI folks and people who are already in the, you know, sex educator realm, get it. You know, they get it in a different way, especially LGBTQ folks, in terms of, you know, like the sexual oppression that we often hold and how we don't get to learn about certain things. So it clicks somewhat in that realm, you know. And for some people, it's like, this is amazing. I love it. The concept is great, but how do you do it? And so what is interesting is that we continue to fall into this like pattern, I guess, that we always want the answers. Just, can you just give it to me like in 1, 2, 3, like, and really the mysterious answer to all of this is literally relationship building. And relationship building can't happen successfully unless you are understanding who you are, because you cannot relate to other people unless you relate to yourself, like, and understand your own boundaries. And I want to preface this by saying, I say this, and I'm not saying like I'm some, you know, like I got this. I don't. I am still learning my shit all the time. Like I'm still learning my boundaries all the time, you know, like it's because I'm listening and I'm thinking and I'm watching and so it's not like you get to a point where you just know all this stuff, you know, it's like you are engaging with yourself constantly, asking yourself questions and stuff.
One of the crucial elements is being able to be honest with ourselves. And that I wonder, and, you know, this is my observation too, even among, you know, more learned kind of emotionally developed people, there's something about confronting the feelings within us that sex brings up that adds an extra layer of complexity. And then you add to that somebody who's carrying a sexual trauma history can make it doubly, you know, confronting, let's say. Would it be okay if we talked about how you did some of that healing work on yourself?
Yeah, it's been, you know, I'm still deeply in it, I have to say. I'm in a great place right now in my healing. But it's been, I would say, you know, I started doing my healing process when I was around 20 and I'm 51 right now. So it's been consistent, you know, trying to figure out what can I do with talk therapy, art, all these things. But it really started because of my daughter. I mean, really and truly, I was ready to die. I didn't want to be here. You know, and so when my daughter came around, of course, this is also very unhealthy codependency, you know, living for your child. But that was it. That was the thing that kept me alive. And so I was like, I'm gonna, you know, show up for her, even though I'm suffering and I still suffered and with wanting to not be on this earth and all of that. I still was there for her because I was like, if I leave, she has no one. And so I kept that. If I leave, she has no one. So I won't be here. And so just wanting to be a good parent and to raise her and to be present, that was part of my healing. But I think the real big thing was the healing process for me, or has been to unlearn everything I learned about sex and intimacy and relearn it. And that's been really difficult because the work that I do and the healing that I do, really, it's almost like a constant CBT, you know, it's like shifting your fucking mind and really changing how you think about this shit, because literally we've been doing, you know, the work in this healing process. I kept thinking about healing while I was doing this. I was like, what is healing? Because most everyone would be like, when I did talk to people, they're like, did you call the cops? Did you tell? And I'm like, that's not what I want. I was like, that's not what I want at all. I don't want police. I don't want any of that, you know. So it was there the beginning of, yeah, what is it? What do I want? And then talking to other people. Like at that point, you don't even know what the hell you want. You just know that you're in pain, you know, like you just know you're in pain and you have no freaking clue. And so at first, the thing that I thought was, okay, I have to heal my sex. I have to heal my sex because my sex was I was like not there. You know, I would want it, but then once I was there, it was like not there. I was very, acting out many things that I thought I was supposed to be and act. And I did that for a long time, you know, and then I was like, well, that's not authentic. So I was like, what is it that I do want? And I literally, it was just like trying things out because I really didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. So I made a lot of mistakes. I got into a lot of not healthy relationships, of course, because there is a trajectory that can be a trajectory from, you know, child sexual abuse to domestic violence, teen dating violence, all of that. And I was a part of all of that. Teen dating violence. I was in several domestic violence situations. And you wonder, why is this happening to me? This is what I kept on asking myself. I was like, why do people keep picking me and wanting to hurt me and wanting to kill me? Like, why? Why do people want to possess me? And that literally was like answering that question. And it's like, oh, I'm actually picking these people. Like I'm seeing these people. They see me. And I am allowing it because, of course, people who want to do harm or people who have that tendency really know how to find the people who are needy and, you know, who have not been witnessed. There I was. And so I was like, oh, it's me. So, and this is part of it. It's like the healing was always like, oh, so I have to make different decisions. Okay, so then who do I like? You know, so when people ask me this, it's not like this is 30 years of asking myself questions, making mistakes, figuring if talk therapy was fine or not, and then really just experimenting and being curious. And so curious about what kind of relationship I wanted and coming out as polyamorous, curious about other styles of sexual expression. Then I found out about kink and I was like, oh, the world opened up for me. It was like, this is my home. I belong here. And so kink was like the best medicine for me for so many decades. I mean, like it's so much wonderful medicine for me because I literally feel like I got to express some rage that I wasn't allowed to express in the real world, quote unquote. In this kink world, in this space that I created, in this safety zone, I could release that rage in such a powerful way, and I could accept, impact, so that I can release what's inside of my body. You know, like to get it out. There'll be times where I was like, I need a session. I need a flogging. I need something to just make me freaking cry with the boogers coming out, and then I can sleep, you know?
Yeah.
So all of that has been healing for me. And one of the biggest pieces that I say this all the time is what a gift it is to talk to other survivors. That is healing. That's medicine by itself. Just to know that other people can talk with you, listen to you, understand you. That's beautiful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this is the thing, you know, when we also know that statistically how common childhood sexual abuse is, that it happens to probably more children than it doesn't, which is, you know, outrageous to think about that, but it's part of the deal. And also that in the vast majority of cases, it's not just some stranger hanging around the school.
90%.
It is somebody that the kid knows. It's somebody 90%. In their immediate orbit, you know, and it's not always this kind of spooky pedophile. It's someone who's not even, you know, on the spectrum of pedophilia. They're just a person who's, you know, doing whatever they're doing inappropriately and causing harm and violence in kids' lives. And because we can't talk about even that stuff, we can't talk about sex, we can't talk about the context in which kids get sexualized without their permission. And then, you know, as you're saying, that parents, certainly in the generation that you and I come from, and I can't imagine it's changed too much with the current generations, parents who struggle to talk about sex with their spouses are going to struggle to talk about sex with their kids because, we just, it's a whole thing. So for folks who are listening, who may be, in their houses or sitting in their cars or riding the subway with headphones on, nodding their heads, right now going, yep, I'm down for all of this. And maybe there's a kid in their life, maybe they're the parent, maybe they're the carer, maybe they're, the aunt, the uncle. How might we alter a tradition in our family or in our, and I don't mean family as in bio family, but also chosen family, right? Our unit. How might we alter the culture straight out of the gate to start prioritizing and privileging really truthful conversations about sex that are, have the gravitas of you need to know this, but also maintaining some buoyancy and lightness. So it's sort of, there's an equal degree of, be watchful, right, but also it's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is just, first I'll say this just to give a clear distinction in terms of the HEAL Project. In terms of the HEAL Project, when it comes to working directly with children or families and stuff, we offer a lot of tools and media tools as well that they can access. And then that on another level, we work directly with therapists and advocates and people who work with families, people who have a relationship and a connection already with family members and all of that. And so we do the train the trainers, because as doing this work, we feel that these are at the front line and these are the people that need to understand their own stuff before they're trying to work with other people with this cookie cutter model type of thing. So we do a lot of that. And then we work in the movement itself, connecting this work to all movements. And we do workshops on that. We say, tell us any movement, we'll connect this to it. And so, and now, in terms of this question, this is something that I really want people to hear when I say this, when it comes to children. When it comes to children, we are in a space that automatically, we have power over children. And I often say that when you have a child, when you actually raise a child, it is probably the first time in our lives where we have ultimate power. And I always ask people, what would you do with that power? Because as a parent, literally, you've given this, you have a whole human being that you could do whatever you want. Literally, right? Because children don't have power. And so I say to people, like, if you really care about children and really care about their lives, then you have relationships with them. It's not a go hug that person, the forced relationships. Children are forced into relationships all the time. They are told to hug people and say, that's your cousin, so go like them and do that, and rather than allowing them to figure out how it is that they want to relate to people, how they meet people, if they hug them or not, give choice. And it's as simple as that, and when I meet children for the first time and they say, go hug, and I'm like, no, that's okay. I was like, you don't have to hug me. And then I ask them questions. Curiosity is one of the most beautiful things. And curiosity is something that we should always hold with kids, because if we were always curious, we will shut the fuck up and we'll listen to them.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do that. It's hard to do that when we know, because as adults, we feel like I got all the answers. I'm just going to tell you because it's so much easier. You don't have to deal with that shit. And that's not appropriate, because that child has to go through it. That child has to fall on their face. All you do is provide the information and be like, okay, there you are. All right, you got it. Go ahead. And what we think raising children is, what we think having relationship with children is that we will do anything at all costs, even their own emotions, to protect them under the guise of protection. And if we're really protecting children, then we're actually teaching them what that means. Because my mother was protecting me my whole life. I had no idea. I was like, what does that mean? Protecting me from what? What's going on? It would have been great if I had some say in that to understand what these things are. So having relationships with children, curiosity, really talking to them. Kids know what they're talking about. When children are talking, even if we don't understand it, we have to be quiet for a minute and try to listen and ask different questions. If one question isn't working, it's something else. Use different approaches. And yeah, I just think that we have to start seeing children as human beings. They're human, and they're learning and navigating their way in this huge freaking world that they know nothing about. They absolutely know nothing about. And they're looking to you as the adult to be like, make sure that I'm okay, but don't swallow me whole, right? Swallow the children.
Yeah. I hope you're enjoying this episode of The Erotic Philosopher as much as I enjoy bringing it to you. I love being able to introduce these guests from around the world to you, and in return, it would help me enormously if you would go to Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts and leave The Erotic Philosopher a rating and review. Your labor there helps this podcast land in front of people's eyes and ears, and what better way to help create a more inclusive and supportive world than spreading more information to more people, and you'd be doing a great favor to me too. If you would like to find out more about working with me, head over to my website, that's cindydarnell.com, where you'll see my offerings as a therapist or coach for a streamlined and personalized service, plus my online pleasure school under the online courses tab, where you'll find a suite of pre-recorded classes ready to go. There's something there for everyone. You'll also find my online community under the community tab, where you can join me and others just like you navigate the topics we discuss here on The Erotic Philosopher, and so much more. There's no shame in needing support to better understand these complex parts of our lives, and I am here to support you every step of the way. We're also on Instagram and Twitter at The Erotic Philos, that's PHILOS. You can also follow me on social media. I am at Cindy, CYNDI _DARNELL on Instagram, TikTok, and on Twitter. Thanks for joining us here today, and now let's get back to the episode. I know that you've got a YouTube channel where you talk with your child, right, about their upbringing with you and what it was like having a parent like you. Again, I mean, I think that's incredibly powerful that here's your child now who's an adult, right, who is able to reflect back on their childhood and say, this is what it was like growing up with a parent who spoke to me like I was a human and not this thing that needs to be protected. And that's not to say, obviously, that protection is not important. Of course, we want to protect the more vulnerable people in our lives, but protection by withholding is not helpful. What are the responses been to your YouTube series about talking to your kid about your relationship?
Yeah. It's been very well received. We did 2 seasons of it, and so it's there as a library, and we have all the different topics we talked about, and people loved it because they were like, basically, it's always the question is like, this idea is great, but how do you do it? And so through there, I was just showing, here's a simple tip that I did. Here's something you could try. This is how I talk to my daughter. And even when she was younger, like I would say things to her, and she'd be like, "Oh, mom, gross. That's sex. I don't want to hear about it." But I still did it. I would talk to her. I would use language she would use, I remember one time as a sex educator, I would come home with, condoms and dental dams and stuff. And I'd always leave them around the house, and we had a practice. I was like, can you go through the condoms and look at the dates and see which ones are old, throw those away and keep them. And I would tell her, here, have those in your room. And she's like, I'm not having sex. And I was like, sucking dick is having sex, right? And she's like, oh, gross. But, just jokey and just saying like, yeah, that's sex too when you do that. So, just in case, leave it there if you ever change your mind and you have something, but make sure you're checking so it was just a conversation. It wasn't like, let's talk about sex. That really doesn't work. That doesn't work. It's like sex is a conversation that happens throughout your entire life with that child.
Yeah. And so it's like you're creating a culture within your home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not just like, and then really that's when people are really uncomfortable because like, wow, we've never talked about this. And that's all of the sex talks has to do with what the kids see you do, how you interact with your friends, how you allow people to treat you. and the boundaries you set, that's all about the sex. That's all about it, because that's about human sexuality is literally about how we connect to ourselves and how we connect to others, whether that's sexually, intimately, or whatever, right? So that's all the lesson right there. Kids are mostly watching your ass. They're watching. And so you can say whatever the hell you want out of your mouth, but if you're doing another thing, they are looking at the thing that you're doing. And so I gave a lot of little tips like that, tips that really saved my life, like having a joint journal with my daughter where we kept it in the kitchen. And there was a time where she was.
Oh, that's an amazing idea.
Oh, yeah. She wasn't even talking to me for a while. She was mad at me. And I'm not going to make her talk to me. Right. So here's another thing, because some parents be like, this is my house. This is disrespectful. You're going to talk to me. And I'm like, no, that's her emotions. That's what she's expressing. And I'm like, okay, you don't want to talk to me. I still need communication. So I put the journal out and we would write notes to each other. I think for a whole week, she wasn't talking to me and we were just writing notes and stuff, which was super helpful. We were still communicating. Great. And then later things kind of evolved and stuff. Another thing was like, like when learning by proxy, I would say, sometimes I wanted to talk to my daughter about a particular topic that was kind of hard. And what I would do is invite a friend over and have her hang out right there near us doing coloring or whatever like that. And we talk about that thing in depth in front of her. And she would listen to the whole thing. I wasn't talking directly to her, but she got all of that information. And I know she did, because she's, children are always listening, and she was listening to the emotion and the, this tough topic. And I was like, we have to have deep and really good conversations like that around our children. Because sometimes just saying we need to talk about the culture of rape, that's not going to work. We could watch a movie about that shit and be like, what do you think about that? Why do you think that happens? Like, why do you think that girl or that guy didn't get any help? Why? Just questions save your life, because that's all you have to do. When you're with a kid, mostly if you ask questions, it's mind blowing. If we just shut our mouths and just listen or ask questions, they will direct us to wherever, and we learn things from them like that. But it's
that they can set the pace, and they can kind of also set the depth of the inquiry through what they are ready for, what they intellectually are able to sort of conceptualize and process will come out in the way that they ask you questions, or as you're saying, when you're listening to them, and then you invite curiosity in to sort of say, well, tell me more about that. How do you feel about that? What's going on for you internally about that? And that if they trust you and they know you're not going to, get on them about it and start interrogating them or shaming them. How does this cultural approach that you take with this, and I mean like small C culture, how does this sit perhaps in families that have a more traditional big C culture that is a little less open to this kind of stuff? Is there still room for people who come from more conservative backgrounds, religious backgrounds, that kind of stuff?
Yeah,
How do we navigate this?
I think that there is room for everyone. So when the work that we do is really based on a human sexuality model, a healing sexuality model that I kind of created, and then a Red V came in and helped perfect. And so we show the model, and the model has these 9 pillars of like, in a perfect world, these 9 pillars are kind of the things that we would kind of navigate through and talking to our children or learning for ourselves as adults, re-engaging around human sexuality, all these things. And so, one of those pillars is kink and BDSM and, spirituality and transcendence, right? So often when I show that model, I tell you it's like a playbook. In every city I go to, they're like, so do you expect me to teach a 5-year-old child about kink and BDSM? So I say, no, actually. I said, this is just a model.
And on that, you have the patience of a saint.
I say, actually, no, but this is a model kind of just indicating fact. This is human sexuality. This is how sexuality builds. And so some people might interact with that pillar and many won't. But the fact is, it exists. So that is a part of knowledge, right? And you can take pieces of that knowledge without ever talking about kink or BDSM. For instance, the culture of boundary setting, the culture of mentorship, the culture of learning, all of these things in the kink and BDSM community are fucking wonderful. Anybody can take from that learning and not have to pick up a whip or anything, right? So this is my thing is like, we can't continue to be afraid of these things because that's the fear. It's like, oh, kink and BDSM, we can never talk about that. But actually, there's so many wonderful things that you can learn about it and not even engage with it, right? You could actually meet wonderful people who are kinky and never have had the opportunity to meet them, right? So when we talk about religious families or anything like that, that model is very what do you call it? It's not a cookie cutter approach. So it is, you can take a harm reduction approach with it, right? And we often say, take what works for you and leave the rest behind. Because even if with those 9 pillars, if you talk about one of the pillars, I'll be happy because you've begun the process with your child and your child will lead the rest of the way, right? But because the very first pillar is curiosity. It is curiosity and inquiry, allowing kids to ask questions and stuff like that. If you even do that, that is a good beginning. You don't have to be perfect. And that's the whole thing. We don't have the playbook. You don't have to be perfect. Every child is different. Every family is different. Some people would be like, no, I don't want to talk about that. But the reality is that talking about human connection, how we connect to one another, how we love one another, how we're good to one another, also is about loving ourselves. So if we teach our children to love themselves and what that means, they can have healthy relationships. And you're not necessarily talking about P and V sex. You're not necessarily talking about that, right? But you can't just do the health and reproduction, like that's old, like health and reproduction is one part of it. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's about health and reproduction. But there's also pleasure. There's also so many things, so many things that we really miss out on. And it's something that we have to do when we're adults.
Yeah. And I think that's that thing too, that even though the traditional model speaks to, that sex is about reproduction, when we are really honest with ourselves, we understand that actually sex is not about reproduction, that very rarely is that why any of us have sex, even if we are from a more traditional conservative sort of place. And, even still, those folks tend to not only have sex for reproduction, and not to even mention sex by ourselves, which is a whole other thing that people will shy away from, that there is this whole stigma around talking about that. And the bigger thing is so much more about just navigating the feelings that come up for us as adults in the company of small folks, but also in the company of just other adults. That makes sex such a awkward topic. It's often not the sex itself, as you say. We don't have to even talk about taking your pants off, but people just don't want to even talk about the feelings that go with it. They don't want to be uncomfortable. And when we are not willing to model discomfort in front of the people we love, we set other people up for harm, including ourselves, because that's when harm occurs, because we can't tolerate discomfort and then shit just gets out of control.
It's about our connection skills, and the connection skills for me include like when our intuition, our playfulness, our trustworthiness, or all of these things. Those things are built, right? Because usually with children, we don't tell them to build that. We say, that's your uncle, you trust your uncle. And they're like, oh, okay. So it's like, rather than telling, we can figure out what does that kid feel in their heart and in their body when they see that person. Do they feel happy? Do they want to go hug them? Do they want to play, and say, I want to see Uncle so-and-so. Then you understand your child, what they feel, and now allow them to express that feeling, right? It's as simple as that, because when we allow them to do that and teach them about boundaries and when things feel wrong, I often say, what do you call it? Our intuition. Most people don't think about that as a connection skill, but it's one of the hugest ones, especially for people who are identified female at birth, because our intuitions are often just thrown to the side and just like, oh, you're crazy. That's not really happening. It's probably something else. I can't tell you how many people have said that to somebody else because they didn't believe what the person was feeling internally. I don't feel comfortable with that person. I don't like what they said to me. Or so, and they're like, it's okay. It's about discomfort, right? And that intuition gets pushed down because it's like every time I feel this and I tell somebody, they don't believe me. So maybe, am I crazy? Right? It's just those little things like that. It's like building that intuition, having people listen to what you say and say, what I feel in my body is actually correct. You cannot tell me that it's wrong. And I have to have a relationship with my body telling me that's dangerous. I don't like that person. That person is safe, right? And so it's like things from childhood, but we end up learning that a little too late as adults, you know?
Yeah, if we learn it at all. I know folks that I work with who are in their 50s and 60s who have spent their entire lives bereft of that level of kind of intuitive intelligence, not because they're dumb, but because it was smashed out of them, either actually physically or, you know, psychically, socially, culturally. It was just they were dismissed and belittled and told, no, you're crazy, you're making it up. And then they go through their lives so disconnected from their wisdom, you know, and I don't mean cerebral knowledge. I mean the wisdom, you know, the wisdom that's in our bodies. And coming back home to that, again, I mean, that's sex education. It's not just the taking off your pants.
When we're thinking about the sex education too, I just want to add to that, like one of the pillars is identity and behavior, because in this thing, we don't talk about gender separately and stuff, because identity and behavior is tons of different kinds of identities, and your identity and behavior don't have to match. They can, but they don't necessarily. So we take out this notion that there's a binary of, okay, so now if you're this or that, it's like gender and sexuality is fucking fluid. Can we get this right? It is fluid. Some people feel wonderful flowing all back and forth, like me. I'm very fluid, right? And then there are others like, nope, I love it right here. And that's fine. And some people are there for 60 years, and then one day they're all the way at the end, and that's their fucking prerogative, right? It's like, that's what identity is. But because we live in this kind of world that says there's only this, a man and woman, then it takes so long for people to get to their truth, their who they are. Again, understanding our own selves. And that's why when we talk about identity, it's all types of identity. We don't just put it on at that, you know, that people get to decide what their identity is. And that could change. It's not set in stone if it doesn't want to be. Like, imagine if a kid knew that. That would be so fucking awesome, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it would be amazing to be like, I can? Because how many times we tell our kids, you can be whatever you want. Bullshit. Because as soon as they want to do something or go get a job somewhere or go to another state to go to college, they're like, no, you can't do that. And I'm like, we have to be honest with our children about the realities of the world. There's the internal, interpersonal, and then there's the institutional outside world. These are different realities.
Absolutely. And this is the thing I think that's so, again, you know, important about what you're offering to people here is that while in the US, especially, you know, this debate about the sex education and now the book banning and book burning and all this shit that goes on in this country, and then in other countries where they're a little less, you know, foaming at the mouth about it, but still there's a conservative kind of element to sex education in that it's a bit kind of fear-based and alarmist-based and that kind of stuff. And, you know, where you're really empowering communities to just go, don't even worry about, you know, school sex education if it's happening or it's not happening or whatever. You know, we can do this. We can do this as communities. We can do this as families. We can do this as carers. We can do this as citizens.
We must.
We must, right? So, I mean, I could keep talking to you all day, Ignacio, but I know you've got a little one in the other room and I don't want to keep you away from your wonderful family. So for folks listening who want to get involved, who want to learn from you, either in person or online, depending where they are in the world, what's coming up next for your projects? And your links are going to be in the show notes, but are there things in particular that folks can get involved in?
Yes. So right now, we are very excited about two things. One is our Just Healing training, and that's the training that's based on RASHIM, which is the sexuality model. And we have a 101, 201, and 301. We're developing that right now, and that is for a wide range of folks, but we are really focusing on advocates, therapists, sex educators, all that. So these trainings are in-depth, like 5-day trainings, learning about the model and how we're trying to shift how we think about this. And then also we have a media show called Caution Unrestricted. And it's a show we started a while ago. We did one season before, and the first season was called Bad Survivor. It's a sarcastic and really like a good, harsh look at like sexual violence, child sexual abuse. And we have, myself and Redvi, two survivors, talking about things very candidly and sarcastically. So this second season, which I'm so happy with, was called Family Dirt. And we really dig into our family structures and how our family structures have contributed to creating a culture of sexual violence. And so we share stories, we curse a lot, and it's awesome. And the third episode is just about to come out, and we have 5 episodes in the season.
Excellent. I am going to follow that up. I haven't seen any of those, so that sounds like it's right up my street. Ignacio, so wonderful to talk to you, and I look forward to seeing you in the world again somewhere in real life soon rather than just virtually. And please take care of yourself.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. This was lovely. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.